Okay, welcome everyone. This is our post-service discussion for August 16th, 2020. Of course, it's happening on August 18th because we had a congregational meeting, but we are here with JC Pratt, and we are discussing her service, Believe the World Can Change. So thank you so much, JC, for doing this. Well, let's...
Oh, it's great fun. I've enjoyed. Okay. So I'm thinking, anybody here have a question or some part of it they want to talk about, or what all?
Well, I have a point that just flitted through my head when I was listening. That yes, the Earth can change, and it has. The harmonics of the Earth have actually changed within my lifetime. The big question is if humans can keep up with that. And sadly, I think there are many who cannot, who are not willing and not open enough to understand that they have the control of their own mind. The world is really a matter of perception.
Yeah. What to do about my sense of who I am and how I perceive myself has been something that I found freedom in the last 30 years by learning how to...
Oh, no. Is there, Lilene, real quick before you...
kind of thing where, and so what? Okay, so anyway, and it's a skill.
Come join me, you keep freezing out.
Oh, okay, sure. All right, I'm going to join her because I'm freezing up. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. With as much as technology gives to us, you know, it also gives us headaches, I think. So.
Okay, well, I guess then I better leave this.
Yeah.
Leave.
Right.
Okay, I've left the meeting.
So.
Okay.
So, Julianne, would you mind just recapping your comment? Just
sure.
to make sure. Yeah.
Sure. The thought flitted through my mind as I was listening to the sermon that yes, indeed, the world can change. The Earth indeed has changed frequencies, harmonics within my lifetime. The big question is if humans can change with the Earth. And sadly, I think that many cannot. And I think it's also a matter of every one of us here is a privileged white person to the extent that we have the time to even think about this question. And, you know, the people in Beirut certainly don't have time to think about this. Their world was literally blown up. Although others in this country are also having their lives blown up literally too. So we are not exempt. But a lot of us are on the outside of that trauma looking at it, you know, looking at it from the outside. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And I don't want to imply that, oh, I can see what needs to be done and you just aren't doing it. I don't want to convey that tone at all.
Well, whatever it looks like, human beings need to admit that change is reality.
Yes.
Things are really always changing. And the problem is many of us are afraid. We don't know who we are when things around us change. And that's a serious statement. So consequently, what I have learned is a personal skill in the shamanic community I belong to that I also find fits very nicely with Unitarianism is if I find that I feel out of step with something that happens in my life, I can check and see, did I just do something childlike from a long time ago? Did I get angry because of what this person said because of now, or because of something that's left over from my past? And I can deal with the thing that's left over from my past. I've also sort of learned to accept the possibility or the reality of past lives that also might be affecting how I behave today. But the point is, change is, and Donna has made us very aware of that. I was intrigued by the chaos concept, and I find that to be very true. There is a lot in my life that goes through that phase of concept of chaos, that in the chaos, you look around and you see what could be different. And I don't mind changing. And a lot of people feel they lose themselves if they change anything.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons the Unitarian group is so important to me, is we put our arms out and let each other change within our group. And we prize the person in their new role, as well as understanding that what they did before was just how things seemed to them. So, yeah, that's really important, Julianne. And yes, because we have the time to be able to think about that kind of stuff, we best do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
I'd like to say something.
So yeah, great. Let me go ahead and mute everybody. I'll unmute you, Connie, but we've been joined by 2 new people, so that's why, just to keep everything orderly. All right. And as before, you can unmute yourself. So there we go. Connie, I've asked you to unmute, and
I would be interested in hearing from each person about how they feel about change. I mean, changing themselves. You know, for different people, they have different feelings about change. I'd be interested in hearing from people.
I agree. I wonder if we can do that closer to the end.
Okay.
Yeah, just so that if people want to talk to JC directly.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll write it into the chat so I don't forget, and we'll do that maybe like, after we get a few more questions in.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Lillian. Sorry.
Oh, you've unmuted me.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I did kind of want to address that, but not directly. When I was listening to you, JC, I was so reminded of, in 1971, my first year in graduate school, a professor that I had talked about chaos theory and crisis intervention. And the thing that he said to me was something that I have never forgotten. And that is that when things are chaotic, when one is in crisis, it is truly an opportunity to mobilize one's resources and make very meaningful change that will be lasting change, because you'll come out on the other end even greater enhanced than when you went into the crisis. And so when I first got to hear her whole paper, and I realized, first of all, it was done 20 years ago, and how current it was today, it reminded me again of that experience. And so I'm hypothesizing that because of the Unitarian community, that we seem to weather crises and chaos more, I don't want to say more effectively, but I think that we do as a community go through different things that happen and come out differently. And it seems to me, from trying to be on the outside looking in, that it's because we not only process something emotionally, but we also process it cognitively, intellectually, historically. In other words, we think not just about religion and turning to God to solve this crisis or this chaos, but we look to our history and our past. I wonder what you think about all that.
Well, first, the thing that's wanting to say is, it's because we're not afraid. And when I think I said some point in the speech, I did my 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're afraid, these things come up. And if you don't ever get afraid, if you just go, oh, that's interesting, I wonder how it will feel being in that. You're just gonna talk to other people about it, and you're not gonna get all upset about it. So the absence of being afraid, I think, is, I mean, you know, you've heard me walking down the hall and say, oh, and then I'll come in and I'll say, I just figured out I don't have to hate my mother anymore. You know, I mean, come on. That makes your life real different, especially if you can let go of back and back and back and back and back, way back. So, yeah, part of it is because we don't waste any time being afraid. We say, okay, what will this really make different? We have people like Donna to keep us on the line.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up Donna and her talks about chaos and order. It's also been a fascination of mine, just because I'm so interested in story. And
Yes.
Of course, you know, story is really the traversing between chaos and order. And there's a writer, he's responsible for a couple of television shows like Community, and another one is an animated show, Rick and Morty. And that's Dan Harmon. And Dan Harmon has a very interesting idea about the traversing of chaos and order. And I'd like to share it with you real quick. So if you can see the screen here, we've got a circle with 4 hemispheres and 4 quadrants, right? Can everybody see that? Yeah. So the idea is that the northern hemisphere represents order. The southern hemisphere represents chaos. Okay. The eastern hemisphere represents incompetency. The western hemisphere represents competency. And so moving from 1 to 8 is the hero's journey. So in the first quadrant, the hero is incompetent but in order. In the second quadrant, the hero is incompetent but in chaos, and the chaos forces competency in the fourth quadrant, or in the third quadrant. And then finally, we return back to order and competency in the final quadrant, right? And this is it. And what it does is it's a systematic way of spelling out how we dive into chaos, because again, chaos is the creative. It's where we go to search for what is constructive and creative, but we have to order it into, you know, the raw materials of ordering it into being. And is that an explanation that you can agree with?
Yes, I shy away from the word incompetence. I just would say questioning. I mean, just uncertain that that's all there is.
Right.
You go through uncertainty. And when you go through uncertainty, you're letting your mind wander into possibles.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and what I've learned because of the requirements of the shamanic teaching is I have learned to embrace the possibles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see it as going over a bridge that goes up and then down. And I can't see the possibles until I get clear up on the bridge of seeing things differently. And then I can see there's possibles and I start figuring out how to choose. But I'm looking forward to the moment when I can realize there's some possibles.
Oh, yeah. Well, competency just means that you don't have a skill, right? Or incompetency,
mm-hmm.
right? It's not meant as a derogatory.
I know,
just,
but that's, to me, yeah, that's a good drawing, a good thing. Because from the lower two quadrants,
mm-hmm.
keep coming ideas that don't fit in with the top two.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, I think maybe for me it was important that I let go of my Christian creed step by step by step while I was in college, away from my family, and learning step by step by step about how the world really was different from it had been in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So we had some sort of like thing. Okay, so who else has something to ask or say?
Nobody has typed into the chat yet. I don't mind calling on people though. How about newcomers? Joanne, do you feel like saying something? I've asked you to unmute. There you go.
Okay, so from listening to JC, this is a reoccurring thing that I see in countries, in leaders who are dastardly, in my next door neighbor, and unfortunately in me. And that sometimes is when I want to win, or I don't do this often, or want something, I see people creating chaos. And then the other people are running around to fit that particular person's needs. And they hurt a lot of people. And sometimes we don't stand up to ourselves or another person. Reality for me is seeing who I am right now, not the little girl who I was. And that's been a challenge for me because I remember a lot of things, and I'm certain that little girl is wide and awake, and I'm going to help her to go someplace else. And the last thing I thought for myself, these are things I'm learning, is that the person I see who annoys me, unfortunately, is mirroring a lot of myself to me. So that's where I'm at from JC. And I liked what she said. That's helped me a lot. And that is using my I statements when I'm concerned or have a problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that, of course, goes against some really big no-nos in our culture for a woman to make I statements and present that as truth. So that's a biggie. And if we get so we're comfortable with it, we're winning.
Yeah. Well, I invited Joe or Glennis to speak. Go
through the hate portion of the sermon. Yeah.
Okay, so Julianne, I'll read it if that's okay with you. It says, let's go through the hate portion of the sermon. Word is overused, defang, but true hatred lives within humanity. Does it still serve us? That's a great question. You want to tackle that, JC?
I don't see the question anymore, so say it one more time.
I'll unmute Julianne and let her ask.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to usurp your words.
Oh, okay.
There we go. My question, I paid particular attention to the hate section. I think the word in common usage is way overused. Its power has been defanged, but true hatred still exists within humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps it served a survival purpose long eons ago. Does it serve us now? And is it simply a part of human nature, or is it something that we can eliminate? The nonviolence folks say yes, it can with great work. That's the work of a lifetime for most people.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that people don't see the power concept that goes with hate is to make them feel that it's okay, therefore, to hate. They don't get the fact that they are limiting, well, the power.
Power over.
Power over, yeah. So it's power over, or the power to be. And power, in our culture, we have a trouble feeling that if we have power to be, that other people won't know that unless that power expresses itself as being over them. And that's unfortunate, because the power to be merely looks for the power in someone else to relate to and to share. And we call that love, only we don't, not very much do we call that love, but that is what it is. Now, there's an interesting thing that I learned in nonviolent communication, and maybe I said that and maybe I didn't. If there is an ongoing argument, like a feud, where people have been fighting about this one thing, two people say, or two families, for a long time, as long as they're arguing outside themselves, well, you did this and that happened and da-da-da-da, and you're wrong and da-da-da, all that. But the moment they go inside and say, all I have to do is see you walking down my road and I feel like I'm threatened. That's a feeling. That's not a reality. But the other person doesn't know that, maybe. So what we learned by one session that we listened to on the radio, as long as you talk about how you feel about something, you're talking about yourself. And as soon as you can accept the fact that that person feels diminished in some way because of the way I act, and I feel frightened, da-da-da-da, and you agree that, and you share that, and you accept, okay, I didn't realize you felt that way. I can see how what I do would be upsetting to you. Then they can go back to the issue and solve it in half an hour. Because it isn't the issue, it's how you feel about the issue that's keeping the feud alive. And so just expand that as a principle. Whenever you are tripping over something that you've been mad about for years, or angry at, my parents were angry about this. As soon as you quit talking about the this and talk about how it makes you feel, then you've, I guess, started making those I statements, and you can let go of it because you have control over your I statements. You have control over your feelings. So anyway, that was a big aha moment for me, sitting down in the church basement, listening to that voice teach that, because I know that to be true. In my life, that's been true. So
great.
That's where the power thing comes. And also what I said in my thing of The people who do not have power over how they can live their lives are forced into victimhood. And the other people who can decide, if they will, about their lives, they have power to change. So why should it be those of us sitting here being white privileged people? Because we can. And the people on the other side of the hatred can't. So that's why us, Julianne. I didn't get that right in the beginning, but yeah, I already said that. That's why us.
So if it's okay with you, maybe we could go back to Connie's suggestion that we speak individually about what change means to us.
Okay.
Okay. Laleen, do you want to start us off?
The only thing I would add to what I said before about chaos and crisis theory is Jason was talking about getting up to the mountain and being able to see the possibilities. I talked a while back about hope, and one of the threads that I find in my life is that no matter how awful things got, I really didn't lose hope. And I didn't feel powerless. And so those feelings for me have enabled me to move forward, to make changes, to try new things, to not be frightened. And at different times in my life, they've also made me impatient and sometimes kind of nasty with other people, because I didn't really always understand when I was younger that was how I worked, and not everyone works that way, and that fear is a very real part of the hesitation or the inconsistencies or the unwillingness of a lot of people to take risks or to step up or to do whatever. So that whole piece about understanding how I feel lets me hear how somebody else feels a little better was a real major kind of life changer for me in my interactions, I guess, with other people.
Okay. How about Joe? Do you feel like letting us know, what does change mean to you?
I think what change is for me is, well, let me just go back in my past a few years, several years. When I was working at the newspaper, and a lot of things that I would see didn't set too well with me. I saw a lot of really lovely and wonderful things, but I saw a lot of man being inhuman to other people. When I say man, I mean mankind. And this made me very angry. And when I realized that my anger was getting in my way of doing the things that I wanted to do, achieving the goals that I wanted to achieve, having the people in my life that I wanted to have in my life, I figured it's time to do something about this. So I started seeing a therapist, and that helped quite a bit. And now I know I'm not the angry person that I used to be. Although I get somewhat annoyed with certain things from time to time. And I figure that screaming anger is the only thing I can get out of that is a shortened lifespan. So I try to keep it to a level of annoyance. You know, you can be an annoying son of a bitch sometimes, Michael. You know,
I've been told.
But then also going back to JC's talk that I watched yesterday, as a matter of fact, what I really got out of it was that the more things change, the more they're the same. It's just different players, different games, but it's always the same thing happening over and over again. And, you know, it's too bad because we say that if we don't learn from history, we are bound to repeat it. And I think that a lot of people have not learned from history because we keep repeating it. And I just hope that we don't repeat what we did 4 years ago. Because if we do, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do.
All right, great. Glennis, we haven't gotten to hear from you yet. Can you tell us what you think about change? Oh, you muted yourself. There
Okay.
you go.
All right. A couple of things. I have understood change to be, at least in my lifetime, sometimes painful, a pain in the parts, hurtful, all of that. But in the end, it is like washing out the stuff that's not good and didn't need to be there anyway. And so I've come to embrace change until the next change comes along. And it's always kind of the kicking and screaming again, you know. No, you know, but I really honestly think that change is something that is needed. It keeps us from being stagnant. It keeps us from not being able to grow. But because that's what I think that this change is. And this, right now, we're undergoing a worldwide, nationwide, society-wide, deep change. And if we don't understand that this is something we need to embrace and do what we can to make this the best possible change there is, then what are we going to do? I'd rather not throw up my hands and say nothing.
Well said.
Are we on? We're unmuted.
You're unmuted.
I'm beginning to see that maybe hate's too big a thing for us to handle. Maybe change. Maybe what does our Unitarian church, what are we doing about change? Given change, how are we prepared to help one another go through the change in how it affects our lives? And that's, Connie, sounds like something maybe we could handle. It's not so big because, anyway, I think your question is marvelous when I realize every single one of us has change functioning. How are we doing solving it? Can we share that with one another? Yeah.
Yeah, and I should have said
support one another.
I should have said, you know, that the JC interject whenever something strikes you. Yeah. Right. So you're unmuted still. I said Joanne, Julianne, and Connie, but Connie's got her hand up. Is that okay, Joanne? If I go to her first? Yeah. Okay. Go for it, Connie.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of the difficulty to change, not the world, to change me.
You bet.
That's what I think we don't spend much time discussing with one another. And what happens to me is I feel these changes happening inside me. And then I go, let's say I go spend the weekend with my women friends in Portland. And they're all on their different path, you know. And so then I tend to, I tend to kind of let go of my change, and I become the Connie that they know in Portland. And I feel the same way in all my groups, and I think it's because talking about changes inside ourselves, we have a difficult time because we think it makes other people uncomfortable. And because of that, we tend not to do it. And that could be just my take on it, but for me, I feel, you know, I had changes when I went to college. I had changes when I started working. I made changes when I started traveling, but I just don't think we spend much time communicating those changes to one another.
Well, Connie, if we don't all understand that right now everybody on this screen is dealing with changes to their elemental way of understanding the world, then we're pretending. And I think we should start sharing what we know as our general wisdom about what you just said, how change affects you, how it makes you pull in and not. Next time you want to go see those women, meet with us first. And we'll give you a few smart-ass things you can say that will make them freed up to tell you how they're changing within that group too, because nobody's not changing.
I got the mic open here. I'm going to do this. You know, Connie, because you do such beautiful, incredibly open newsletter articles every week, I hear more from different folks about how much they love what you write because you talk about yourself and how you're feeling, and it makes people more comfortable talking about themselves and how they're feeling. And I hear that continually when I'm talking to other congregants. And that brings to mind to me about how I've needed to, at different points in my life, make changes in friendships because I've grown in directions that are no longer as consistent or even compatible sometimes with people I used to hang with, because maybe we hung for different reasons, organizational hanging, involved in this or that hanging. And so sometimes you just have to let relationships do that natural process they're going to do. But I'll tell you, in our community, you got high ranks, kiddo.
Well, in that spirit of talking about ourselves, Joanne, could you say what change means to you?
I'd say about 4 years ago, I realized that I had to make drastic change. And making that change, I created chaos in my life and chaos for the other people in my life. So much of that is gone now. And I am always spreadsheeting something, working in the office, have a project to do, because I need something to fill that space. And just recently, actually yesterday and today, I realized that I don't have to scurry to get something done. So that creates fear of a new life. And I am learning to say, stopping no matter where I am, and saying, how do I feel about this goddamn thing? And from there, I stand for a minute or two. Please understand, God loves me and doesn't take offense to that. So anyway, I stand there, or I'll sit there for a while. And I just have to say, what do I want to do right now? It's exciting and it's miserable, but I do know that it also brings joy.
Beautiful.
You're growing so fast. I just want to hug you. Can't do any hugging lately.
Glennis, I saw your hand go up, but I'd love to hear from Julianne first about change, and then we'll get back to you real quick.
I am so fortunate to be an extreme introvert, although a lot of you wouldn't know that. And I envision myself as a teen with a backpack tripping through Europe and the US, just flitting around, seeing what's happening. Oh, what's going on here? Let's look at that. Every day was an abyss of the unknown that I had to walk forward or go back. And I wasn't about to go backwards. I was going to jump forward into it no matter what happened. And that's a gift. And if you find yourself in miserable circumstances, and in my own life, that particular circumstance was being bedridden for over a year with undiagnosed rheumatoid arthritis. And I thought my life was over. And I still was not upset. It was like, well, here I am. Now what do I do? You know? And so you have to be, one can be prepared for drastic changes overnight and still be okay with it. That's being, you know, the word now is resilient. But change isn't to be feared. You have to have the confidence in your own being to know that you are going to be safe as a being wherever you find yourself. And the other part of this is, if you have ever been out of body, you will know this absolutely, that you are okay here on earth no matter what happens. Even unto death, you will still be okay. And so change is good.
Glennis, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to add one thing. Back when I was a teenager, and I'll kind of leave out when that was, there was a song that came out because I was a teenager in the days of the protests and the Vietnam War and all of that. The lyrics are as follows, and I know you'll know this song. I'd love to change the world, but I don't know what to do, so I leave it all to you. And I think that the change has to actually, no, I don't leave it to you. This is all I can do right here, is to change how I'm thinking, how I'm believing, study up, do what it takes, because that's where it has to actually happen, rather than worrying about who's doing everything else.
Yeah.
And to go from that, Glennis, to part of the intention of what I wrote 20 years ago and said last week. If you don't know what to do about somebody else's fear, look at your own fear. What would you have to do to not be afraid? Then you have a clue of how you might help somebody else. If you don't know what to do about your anger or about somebody else's anger, then figure out, what do I do about my anger, like Joe did? And then you know what kind of support somebody else will need to be able to get beyond his own anger. Mm-hmm. So none of us is not a whole person in this culture today as we stand. We all have all of the feelings that everybody else does. And we know when we watch that young Black man who was actually a violinist and a body worker get killed, it ripped me apart, because you knew going in what was going to happen, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. And that's when I realized, yeah, I have to be involved, because there's nothing he can do about it. And so remember, we're all of the things of everything. So we can find what we want to do about what would help me change, then I can help somebody else.
For me,
Looking at me again.
when I was thinking about change, the first thing that came into my mind was my 8th grade chemistry class, where we talked about chemical change. And the one universal when we're talking about chemical change is that a chemical change, by definition, releases energy. And yeah, and it's a profound thing, because when we change ourselves, you know, and I'm working on it myself now, see how much you look forward to the next day, how much life you have when you start to institute changes in yourself, positive changes, you know, and it does, there's an energizing quality to it.
Yes, Michael, I felt that change in this little example that I gave of discovering as I walked down the hall behind me,
yeah,
that I didn't need to be mad at my mother anymore.
Right.
Because what I saw was, oh, that was her life she was leading. It wasn't, she didn't care about my life. It was her life. So all the pain and stuff that I felt I had brought into her life, I didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with her and all of her 5 brothers and sisters and her family, and how she felt rejected by the world, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, none of which was me. And I felt what you're talking about. The energy, as it was like her fingers, everything pulled off of me, and I stood all healed in all those places where I had taken on her pain.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, whew, that's much better. I can walk now. I can be now. So yeah, it's chemical, but it's in every time you change.
That's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. The power of forgiveness, right?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
It is so powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I feel like people have gotten a chance to express themselves and talk about your fantastic service. You know, like I said at the onset before we started recording, is that we've gotten such positive reviews and positive comments about this one. So thank you for sharing that with us. Would you mind sending us away with a final thought?
Sure.
Yeah.
I dug up a lot of interesting things in this one that I didn't know I was carrying. And there just happens to be another of my sermons from that 20 years ago. And it's about the concept of playing with new ideas. And that will come up whenever in the fall.
Great.
And I'm really happy because I'm excited about it, because the whole idea of how we play with ideas before we adopt or let go of them is really important and lots of fun. And my main experience is standing on a glacier in another part of the world and watching right under my feet the changing of the ice into water. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to the next one.
Well, I think I speak for everybody when I say we are too. So thank you. Thanks again, everybody. I'm so glad we did this, that we didn't let it go, a week. So
thank you, Martin. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, it's been great. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye, all.